Right now, our pleasure to welcome into the show J.I. Halsell, Salary Cap Insider. J.I., what's up, man? How are you?
What's going on, Craig? Thanks for having me. I'm good.
Great. Very excited to have you. I have questions. You are a guy who can answer them. That's why I'm very happy to have this show, because I just get to ask people who are smarter than me all the things rummaging around in my mind. That's really all this show is. It's a giant front. All right. So the thing that I'm kind of wondering is to get an agent, a salary cap perspective on Lamar and kind of the larger discussion around Lamar when it comes to guaranteed contracts. So when we talk about Lamar, and let's just kind of put, if you're an agent right now, put your agent cap back on. And if you, obviously Lamar does not have one. And I guess the first question I would ask is, do you think Lamar is actually costing himself money by not having an agent?
Yeah, I do. If you really were to try to look at this from an unbiased perspective, the argument is that while to some degree he is saving on a fee by not having an agent and not having to pay a fee to an agent, what he's probably sacrificing right now and has probably sacrificed over the past year or so is getting a contract and maximizing the size of that contract. So when you net it all out, you get a bigger pie and you have to give 3%, 1% of that pie to an agent. Well, that pie was bigger than the pie that he's going to get on his own. And to keep that analogy going, he doesn't even have a pie right now, right? So, he is costing himself money to a certain degree. But I think what's more importantly, what he's costing himself is having kind of the rational, complex thinker in his corner to help him navigate the process and make informed decisions.
So the thing that I think is interesting about Lamar is it's not just like the bigger deal, because I do think guys that have negotiated some of the recent deals without agents have done a good job. But for Lamar navigating this restricted free agency, to me, where he's missing the agent is the ability to go out and see what the market actually is. Are you surprised that it has been fairly empty? Because to be honest with you, J.I., because of kind of the nature of this restricted free agency on this non-exclusive tag for a quarterback of his caliber, I'm not surprised that he, for instance, has not signed an offer sheet.
The complexities of the Ravens being able to have the ability to match any offer sheet that a club may present to Lamar and that he'd be willing to sign adds to, how difficult of a situation this is to navigate. Because to your point, whether we're talking about Richard Sherman, Bobby Wagner, other guys who have self-represented, those situations were a little more simple, right? Because this is going into open free agency and you're just kind of navigating a bidding war to some degree. Whereas now you're talking about a quarterback that a team would have to be, a team other than the Ravens would have to be willing to give up 2 first-round picks to acquire. Then they would have to craft some sort of complex offer sheet that they would have to know would be foolproof, meaning that the Ravens would not match. And that's super complex. I mean, even a veteran agent would have a difficult time trying to navigate the complexities of that type of contract structure. And so it's not even really about having the ability to go talk to other teams and see what other teams are willing to pay. It's really just, as you alluded to, the restrictions that are placed on his quote-unquote free agency. And how do you navigate that, let alone navigate that as a self-represented player?
So let's say all of a sudden Lamar was like, "Hey man, time for you to become an agent again." What would you be advising him to do now? And how would you have advised him to potentially do things differently over the last couple of years? For instance, one of the things that's become kind of a talking point for a lot of people who think Lamar's making a mistake is the difference in money that he's made versus Josh Allen. And that's money he's probably never getting back in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to when I mentioned, about not having an agent versus having an agent and the timing of which, he would have gotten the deal done. Because mathematically, to your point, over the past season or two, he's lost out on money by not having that second contract, that bigger pie, and that's money that you're not going to get back. In terms of, Lamar moving forward, what would the advice be? Well, a lot of focus has been on the Deshaun Watson deal, right? 5 years, $230 million, fully guaranteed. Well, the thing about these deals is that they're not simply a byproduct of who the player is, right? So we know that Lamar Jackson is an elite quarterback. We know that Deshaun Watson, particularly when he was in Houston, was an elite quarterback. But there's a difference in their circumstances, and circumstances often dictate what these deals ultimately look like. The Houston Texans were trying to move on from Deshaun Watson. So therefore, it's a different scenario when you think about him getting to Cleveland. And also keep in mind that the only reason why he got the fully guaranteed contract in Cleveland was because he had eliminated Cleveland from consideration, and he was going to go to, potentially New Orleans. And Cleveland jumped in the last minute and said, okay, look, we'll give you a fully guaranteed contract. And that's how he ended up getting that deal. Again, byproduct of circumstances. Lamar has the Ravens, who would actually prefer to keep him. And so that's what's limiting him from getting this Deshaun Watson fully guaranteed type deal. So again, it's not a byproduct simply of who the player is. But what we lose sight of is that Kirk Cousins has gotten 2 multi-year fully guaranteed contracts. Well, how did Kirk Cousins seem to do that? Well, Kirk Cousins got fully guaranteed contracts because they were only 3 years in length. And it's a long-winded way of saying is that, Lamar, you probably should abandon your desire to have a 4 or 5 year fully guaranteed deal. I think if you use the Kirk Cousins precedent, if you did just a 3-year deal at, let's just from easy math, $45 million per year, so $135 fully guaranteed for 3 years. Now you get another bite at the apple after probably year 2, because if you're still playing at a high level, you're going to get a new deal going into year 3. And that number will be higher given what the salary cap will do. So I think the reason why Lamar is set on this 4 or 5 year deal length is, 1, because of the Deshaun Watson, and 2, it's a little bit of the running back conundrum. Given the fact of how he plays football, this might be your only bite at the apple to get a long-term deal, because he plays in such a way where it's physical. He could get hurt just like a running back. And you see those running back deals, they tend to be longer because they just need to get that bite at the apple. Well, in the case of Lamar, if you want a fully guaranteed deal, it's probably going to be 3 years in length. And I don't know that Ravens ownership would be opposed to giving him that deal, because now when you think about the funding rule, you only have to put 1 year in escrow if you're the Ravens ownership, as opposed to putting multiple years in escrow. So that would be my advice, is that you got to kind of back away from the deal length, and maybe you get the fully guaranteed deal that you're looking for.
J.I. Halsell, salary cap analyst, with us here on the Team 980. So, J.I., you have now hit on my bigger kind of question, because I've had a thought. My understanding of the math is nowhere close to yours. So I wanted to ask someone like you, and very specifically, actually, you this for a while. And so, grand wind-up, here's the question. Is the union making a mistake trying to push for these 4 and 5 year fully guaranteed deals? The reason being, teams don't want to take that kind of cap hit 4 or 5 years at a time. And I think those final 2 years often allow teams to spread out a cap hit on a signing bonus, for instance, that makes it more team friendly and actually gets the player more at signing because they can spread out the cap hit. Am I misguided here in thinking that? And by the way, quarterbacks are most of the time the ones who get 4 and 5 year deals. Occasionally, other people do, but it's kind of accepted. Like, hey, those are funny money, and it's kind of there for cap purposes. Am I misguided in thinking that the union is actually going to get players less upfront in signing bonus money if they push for fully guaranteed deals, and that may actually be a mistake in trying to do right by the players?
So from a cap accounting standpoint, you can create what is practically a 3-year deal and put 2 dummy years, what we call voidable years, as year 4 and 5 to help yourself out with the cap accounting. So the proration that you mentioned, right? So instead of having that signing bonus from a cap accounting standpoint prorate only over 3 years, it prorates over 5 years, and year 4 and 5 void away. It's truly a 3-year deal. So the point is that, I mean, increasingly, and you've seen outside of the quarterback deals and, Patty Mahomes, that deal is the anomaly. No one's signing deals for that long of a period of time. Like his deal is like in excess of 7 years. Guys don't do those types of deals anymore because players understand the value of doing a short deal, like a 3-year deal, so that you can get another bite at the apple. And I think increasingly even quarterbacks, you'll see that. Now, the Deshaun Watson deal is 5 years, but that was the trade-off in order to get $230 million fully guaranteed. Kirk Cousins, again, is the example. It's only a 3-year deal, and it's fully guaranteed. And as a result, Kirk Cousins was able to get a second multi-year fully guaranteed contract thereafter. So it's a long-winded way of saying is that I think we can get to a point where we will see another fully guaranteed contract. And we may even get to a point where we see increasingly a fully guaranteed contract more frequently. But it's to do it over on a 5-year deal to what I mentioned earlier in what we call the funding rule, where owners have to put the fully guaranteed money into an escrow account. So a practical example is on a 5-year deal, going into year 2 of that deal, the owner has to put year 2, 3, 4, and 5 fully guaranteed dollar amounts into an escrow account. That money's tied up for 3 years. Whereas on a 3-year deal, year 1, I pay the guy the money. Year 2, I have to put the year 2 money in escrow and the year 3 money in escrow. But the year 2 money is getting paid to the guy later that year, so I get half of it back. So I'm only having to fund into the escrow account 1 year. That is more attractive to an owner and their cash budget. So long-winded way of saying that if indeed the union is pushing for 4 or 5 year deals that are going to be fully guaranteed, you're right. That is not the proper approach. Instead, we should be looking for Kirk Cousins type deals where it's 3 years fully guaranteed and allows our guys to get back to the market.
Are you surprised more quarterbacks specifically haven't gone that route? And do you think it's possible that a Burrow or a Herbert who's up this year is going to go down that road?
It would not surprise me. The challenge to Joe Burrow contract is that historically the Bengals have structured deals in a way where no money is guaranteed beyond the first year. Now, with a franchise quarterback who's taking you to the Super Bowl and the cusp of another Super Bowl, perhaps you buck precedent. And, he likely does not get a fully guaranteed contract because it's also a smaller market team. When I think about having to put that money into an escrow account, they're not exactly cash rich. So I could see that deal being a shorter deal, maybe a 3-year extension that allows him to get back to the market, but has these rolling guarantees like we traditionally see in contracts where, $25 million is guaranteed at signing and the other $25 million becomes guaranteed if you're on the roster the first day of free agency the next year. In the Herbert scenario, the Chargers have historically been tough contract negotiators. I don't know that Herbert or Burrow or Hurts, for that matter, get a fully guaranteed contract, but I think I would not be surprised if they're shorter in length, 3-4 years.
So if you're advising the union, for you, it's not about pushing for guaranteed contracts, it sounds like. And I've heard this before in varying versions. Really, the issue seems to be the funding rule and some of these cap rules. So would you be pushing to try to simplify some of these things and get rid of the funding rule? Like, how would you be approaching that?
Yeah, that's one of the things in the last round of CBA negotiations that I was quite surprised that the union did not push to eliminate or trade off is the funding rule, because teams are always kind of looking for reasons not to give a player something in the course of a contract negotiation. And the funding rule is a convenient excuse for how we can't give you the guaranteed money that you're looking for because then we're going to have to fund it. And, while we do have a cap budget, we more importantly have a cash budget. And it would strain our cash budget from signing free agents, blah, blah, blah. But more practically speaking, owners don't like having to put millions upon millions of dollars tied up in escrow accounts. And so, I'm surprised that the union has not pushed to get the funding rule removed. But I also understand that the funding rule and contracts of that magnitude where the funding rule comes into play only impact a very small percentage of the player population. And so the union is willing to not push that item for a small percentage of the population and instead win on points that are more impactful to the rank and file player.
Yeah, as someone who's covered a lot of NBA stuff as well, that's been an issue with them. Where like max contracts. Does LeBron want to get rid of the max contract? Absolutely. Is it worth it to do it for just LeBron when they can negotiate other things for the other 449 players? Probably not. So LeBron has been maxed out on his contract for his entire career. Last thing for J.I. Halsell, salary cap analyst here on the Team 980. Circling back to Lamar, he's been tweeting a lot. Do you think he's cost himself in any meaningful way by some of the things that he's said and just the general sharing of his internal thoughts?
Well, he doesn't have anybody, an advocate, to share them on his behalf, right? So, you've got to make your intentions known to a degree. But, I think at this point, from a Lamar standpoint, there probably is a certain frustration with the process. There is a certain frustration about, look, I want to make sure that, my point of view gets put out in an accurate way, but I'm also frustrated that, I'm not getting the contract that I feel I'm deserving of. It's going to be interesting to see if he gets to a point where there's almost kind of a save face type phase of this process where he starts to kind of give in trying to meet the Ravens in the middle, but save face publicly to show that, I was able to do it my way and I was able to get the contract that I desired. But it will be interesting to see, and it'll be really interesting to see if he withholds his services this season.
Yeah, to me, that's always been so off the table because, he's not a guy. He's barely made what he's going to make this year in his career. I think his career earnings are 35, 36 so far, and he's scheduled to make 32. There's just no way that you pass up basically everything you've made in your entire life in 1 year because you're trying to prove a point.
I don't know. I think there's a certain level of stubbornness in this situation that
maybe
that's his leverage, is to withhold his services.
Yeah. Also, I do find it truly comically hilarious that Tyler Huntley, I believe, is still unsigned, and he made the Pro Bowl last year. That to me is my favorite. My favorite just wackadoo sidebar of this story is that their backup option is Tyler Huntley, who made the Pro Bowl last year, and they have all this Lamar stuff hanging out there, and the Ravens haven't even re-signed Tyler Huntley.
Well, he made the Pro Bowl on a wackadoo process, too.
Correct. Just so silly. J.I., this was great. Appreciate you. Your knowledge is fantastic. We're always grateful to have it on the show.
Always, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's J.I. Halsell, everybody, with us here on the Team 980. So to follow up on kind of the end of that with Lamar and him going to Twitter, I hear what J.I. is saying in that he's got to find a way, somehow, some way, to get his message out there. And again, these are the types of things that typically agents do. Either directly, you get a tweet, a release, a statement, or whatever. My client, blah, 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 blah. But Lamar doesn't have that. And he also, certainly, if he wants to call Adam Schefter or Josina Anderson or Ian Rappaport or whoever and give his opinion, they would be happy to put it out there for him. He is a younger athlete who's grown up with social media, and that's the way guys roll. And look, I'm of that age as well, where I'm older than Lamar, but I've had social media around my entire adult life, and occasionally I feel the need to speak for myself. Okay, fine, I get that. But when you're in a negotiation, the public message, even though Lamar is a very public figure and we're talking about football and the NFL and fans and that stuff matters, at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson is negotiating with NFL teams. And knowing who you're negotiating with is really important because that's where your message could go. And if part of the concern for you is that you are difficult, you don't have an agent, you're hard to get in touch with, there's these rumors about, hey, you didn't want to play at the end of last year, and a lot of people around the building thought you could have, and yet you might be selfish. Whether they're true or not, you going on Twitter to push back on them actually isn't going to help your cause with the people that are paying attention, that have control over your future. What you need to do is find a way to talk to them directly or through your actions, not going on Twitter, which, right or wrong, most septuagenarian or octogenarian. I don't think there's that many NFL owners in their 80s, but you got plenty of old dudes who think Twitter is bubkiss. Going on Twitter is not helping your cause. They're like, oh, he's out there tweeting. You could be tweeting about the charity work you're doing, and most of them would be like, oh, he's out there tweeting. Like, you just have to know your audience. And this is where Lamar's stubbornness and Lamar's desire to get his story out there and that and his reputation seemingly overriding the ultimate goal of getting a contract, I think is actually hurting him a little bit, because if there's teams that are looking for an excuse to get out, he's giving it to them. Again, if he can help you in football game, you should probably get over the tweeting. If he fits your cap situation, you should probably inquire. And hopefully Lamar is making that as easy as possible, that there is a point of contact that teams know, hey, this is how I get in touch with Lamar Jackson if I want to discuss an offer sheet with him. But there's a reason that there's many reasons, some of them pretty straightforward and simple, some of them far more complex and controversial. While Lamar Jackson, a 26-year-old former MVP, theoretically entering his prime, has been untouched. But Lamar, I feel like many steps along this process has just not helped himself. And going on Twitter to defend your honor against criticism that hasn't even been said out loud by the people that would have the authority to say it. Like, it's not like John Harbaugh's got out. Every time John Harbaugh stepped in front of a microphone, he's been nothing but complimentary. He said nothing but, I want our guy here. Lamar's my quarterback. So don't respond to the other stuff. Just live above it. That's what I would tell Lamar. Hey, man, you're Lamar Jackson. You're great. Just make it easy to show people that you're great. That would be my advice to Lamar. Probably wouldn't take it. He probably doesn't care what I think. But it's something to consider as we watch these negotiations unfold, and right now it doesn't seem like there's a lot of negotiating happening. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. AJ Perez did a lot of reporting in Phoenix, a lot of talking to owners, a lot of trying to understand exactly where we are in terms of the Commander's sale, and he joins us to talk about what he found next.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.